Joining us now is Representative from the state of Illinois, Mike Quigley. Representative Quigley, you're among a number of elected Democrats who in the last 24 hours have called on President Biden to think carefully about his campaign. On Friday, you said simply, he had a bad debate, we move on. What's changed since then?
I think for a lot of us, it's time to process exactly what took place and the voters' reaction there. You don't want to hastily jump, within hours of an event. I think you have to put it in perspective. Given the historical magnitude of this, the extraordinary dangers, at least in my mind, of a second Trump term, in time to think about all this, it is beyond, in my mind, beyond just a bad night, something to consider. We want to make sure that the campaign has a plan to address this and assuage those fears. We're also going to have time to see more extensive, more appropriate polls that'll be brought out. It usually takes a week or so for them to have any particular value in meaning. So we'll judge all that. I think my point has been, if I were to speak to the president, I would stress, you have served your country extraordinarily well for 50 years. You pulled our country back from what I thought were the clutches of an autocratic president, especially after January 6th, through the pandemic, grew the economy, so many other accomplishments. Make sure that we're making the right decision, because it impacts not just who serves in the White House the next 4 years, but who's going to serve in the House and the Senate, and how much, unfettered power do we want to give somebody like Trump if he were to win.
And speaking of the House, you've served in the House for 15 years and have known the president a really long time. What concerns you about the president running for the presidency again?
Look, fundamentally, this is about a very brutal race and having to go through this. We saw President Obama, in the 30 years ago now, is it that long? I'm sorry, 10 years ago, but he was 30 years younger. Have a very bad debate, but obviously popped right back from that. I haven't seen that from President Biden. So those are the kinds of concerns that impact of how vigorous he can be in what will be a brutal race. He had a tough race. It was going to be close. It's going to be close. It's gotten a hell of a lot tougher. At the best case scenario is the polls remain the same in states where he's behind. He's got to catch up. He's got to improve. And is he capable of meeting the rigors of that task?
Representative, you've also mentioned how Biden leading the ticket could affect down-ballot races. What are your concerns there?
Well, the top of the ticket always affects down-ballot races. It has some statistical impact. And given we probably have 40 to 50 very, very close races in the House, frontline seats, those margins are going to be very, very narrow. So if the top of the ticket is impacted, it's going to obviously impact House races that are going to be and always have been very close. The House is always close in its final numbers. We've seen that now with single-digit difference between majority and minority. Every vote counts, every race counts, because it influences policy. Most policy issues have political solutions. The president is the most important factor in how those races play out.
Now, the president has said he's not going anywhere. It's unclear if anything or anyone can really change his mindset here. But if he stays in the race, by speaking out, do you think that will help him in the long run?
I think his legacy is cemented, an extraordinary one, and one that we should always be extraordinarily grateful for. But I don't know how it impacts his legacy just to stay in the race. I don't think he has to prove anything anymore. All that should matter is who has the best chance to win in November, all personalities aside. Look, I see this as a tragic event. President Biden beat Donald Trump and helped save our democracy. It's not hyperbolic to say that. And to see him at this point, obviously having some difficulties, this isn't fun to have these discussions, but we have to be honest with ourselves. We can't make the voters think a certain way. we have to accept where they are and understand how that impacts elections.
But by you speaking out and saying he should carefully consider this campaign and stepping away from this campaign, do you think if he stays in this race that will hurt him?
The actions and statements and comments of any one member or anybody in the public really doesn't have that much influence on how things turn out in the future, and it's certainly not in elections. No one in a swing state's going to say, well, Mike Quigley said this, I should vote a certain way. You know, my comments are directed toward the president and an understanding of what our priorities are. I think the people that you had speaking before, including Speaker Pelosi and a couple of the senators, I don't think they think their voice makes that much difference in determining votes. I think their hope is that it will influence the president to make the right decision, albeit a very tough one.
We will see what happens. Representative Quigley, thank you so much for your time this evening.
Thank you. Anytime.